Hello and welcome to Chapter 12, Addressing Ethics in Leadership. I think this is an important chapter, and I think you could probably guess why, right? We talk every week about how all of these different, subcomponents and aspects of leadership are truly interconnected in this dynamic thing we're trying to accomplish as leaders, right, to affect positive change. And each of these different things are constantly moving and changing. And we have a responsibility to constantly be having our pulse, right, as leaders on what we can do to be proactively addressing these situations. Well, I've had students point out to me over the years that when we talk about this chapter of leadership and specifically ethics, that they say, Professor Hellman, well, wouldn't you say that ethics kind of is the linchpin or the most integral part of leadership, because without being an ethical or a moral person as a leader, you really can't accomplish all the other things that we have discussed, right? That we really can't be inclusive and seek equity, that we really can't solve conflict to reach a better understanding, that we really can't address people's strengths and use them for the greatest good, right? That people won't trust our intentions as leaders. We won't have our followers really buy into our vision if we are not truly ethical, moral individuals, right? That work, right? That we're supposed to do on ourselves as leaders first. And I think that that's actually very accurate and probably a very astute observation, that we have a moral responsibility as leaders to be ethical, right? To act in ethical ways, because leadership is about, as I've said over and over, it's a human endeavor, right? It's about our interpersonal relationships and how we use those interpersonal relationships to accomplish goals, right? To achieve a vision, to have all of that come to fruition in a way that is doing good for all at all times, right? And so when we talk about ethics, I just looked up the definition really quickly. And I found the definition to read: moral principles that govern a person's behavior, right? And we talk about leadership defined in this class as leaders are effective agents influencing positive change. We see that if we're going to influence positive change, we truly have to be searching for the greatest good for all. And if we're moral and ethical leaders, then we understand that what happens in darkness always comes to light, right? That we see every day in the news, or even in our own lives, situations where people in positions of authority, leaders within our communities, within our government, right, abusing their power as leaders in a way that then affects our societies, our organizations, and creates distrust, right? It creates a breakdown of this foundation of what we can do together. And so we see that happening right now in all areas of society. And so we have this responsibility as we move through these ideas and these principles of leadership to understand that ethics are at the core of these things, okay? So let's talk about some of the things that you're going to find in the textbook, okay? So we know that this is an important chapter. We know that this chapter really is kind of interconnected, as they all are, but truly kind of sits in the center of it all. And so let's talk about what Celia, who's one of the scholars and works on some of the social science and leadership, said and defined ethics within leadership like this. It's doing the right thing the right way for the right reasons. That's important, right? Doing the right thing for the right way for the right reasons. It's really easy to do the right thing when everyone's watching. It is not always the easiest to do the right thing when people are not watching, right? We know this ourselves. We can see this in our own lives and the things that we choose to do or not do when people are looking and not looking. But as leaders, we have a responsibility to make decisions that are reflective and seek the best outcome for everyone, not just the person in power, not just the leader, right? That leans into abuse of power, and that is what we're looking to avoid as leaders searching for and leaning into influencing positive change. And so we discuss then in the textbook 6 factors of ethical leadership, and they go through character being the first. Character is about your foundational principles, right? It's about your scruples. It's about being honorable and doing things and operating in your life and every interaction, not just in the big decision-making pieces, but in every interaction in a way that makes people really trust you in a fundamental way, because your character shows, right? The second factor in ethical leadership is actions, right? So how one maneuvers behaviors and implements decisions and strategies when you're seeking to accomplish a goal, right? Some people have, this idea that whatever it takes to accomplish a goal. Well, whatever it takes kind of has it lacks, when you say it even, it lacks that piece that we understand that we must always address the humanity first. Well, it's not whatever it takes, because what if whatever it takes means that we are then, oppressing a certain group of people? That's not okay, right? If we are abusing a certain group of people, if we are taking advantage or exploiting a certain group of people, or making choices that will affect certain groups of people. So actions is another one, right? And we're showing that we're making correct choices through 3 areas when we talk about actions. Showing respect, serving others. We forget that servant leadership is so important when we talk about leadership. The fundamental place, even if you're an entrepreneur, should be to serve the community, to serve my clients, to serve those around me, because that is where you actually can make money. If you think about Steve Jobs, he was constantly working in his life to find places where society needed to fill a hole. And that's what entrepreneurs do, right? Is they are constantly looking around at their societies and their culture and finding places where we can make the lives of other people better. That's where things like an iPhone came in, or an iPod, when we could have portable music that was easier to function than those big giant Walkmans, right? We are looking how to serve others. And that is obviously a commercialized example, but this is what I mean, right? Is that we can even apply this to every aspect of leadership, including building businesses. And finally, showing justice, right? That we're seeking equity for all people at all times. This is important. We're never seeking to take advantage of anybody or any group of people, most importantly. Third factor in ethical leadership is goals, that our goals themselves must be moral and ethical, right? That we have goals that we know treat all people the same and are going to have good outcomes for all people the same, right? That we are not seeking to make choices that we know are going to affect people in a way that will make their lives worse. We're trying to have positive change. Number 4 factor in ethical leadership is honesty, right? If we are misrepresenting truths, misrepresenting ourselves, what that's going to happen is eventually those truths will come out. They always do, right? And when they come out, what you then are going to experience is you will have dissonance between what you say you are, or what you're doing, and what is actually the truth. And when that dissonance occurs, we create mistrust. And we have mistrust within the group cannot function, right? And as leaders, what we're trying to always do is we're trying to have really healthy groups, right? We're trying to have groups that feel like communities. And so if we are not acting in ethical ways, we are basically fundamentally disrupting the community. That's the opposite of what we're seeking to do. The 5th factor in ethical leadership is power. Leaders have to remember that if we have earned the trust of others, which is what we're seeking to do, right? We're seeking to have grown ourselves and activated ourselves in a way that we are seeking the trust and respect of others. Okay, so if we then have done that, then we have a certain power, right? We have the ability to have people latch onto our visions and help us strategize and motivate and get those visions accomplished. But we have to remember that we cannot abuse that power, because when people believe us, when they trust us, when they are dedicated to our visions, that we have a responsibility to uphold the greatest good for all, right? We can see this in multiple examples of things like cults or throughout history, right? Where leaders have gotten to their place of authority and then gotten drunk on power, right? We have to be really careful that as leaders, we stay committed to our ethics. We stay committed to the people who believe in us, and that becomes the most important thing. Not money, not position or authority, but actual people, right? That we know what is right and we do what is right. Again, whether it's in the shadow or it's in the sunshine. And finally, the last factor in ethical leadership is values. We've talked about this before in this class, how important values are, right? But you think about when it comes to ethics, I mean, again, it's fundamental to have values, your beliefs, your principles that are founded in good, right? In achieving and accomplishing goals that will make people's lives better. And that is what is most important, that we're always seeking the best for all at all times, and not just the people in leadership we are always seeking to build other leaders by showing them the best of ourselves. And by the way, when we fall short of that, right, when we make a choice that is not good, I would ask you to also consider that one of your values be vulnerability. To say, I made a bad choice. That also engenders trust and respect if you can do this honestly, if you can come to people humbly and say, I made a mistake. I hope that I can earn back your trust, and this is what I'm going to do to earn back your trust, because we are all human, and fundamentally all of us know that, right? But we have a responsibility that when we make choices that we know do not live up to who we say that we are, that we realign, make new choices, but come humble and honest and vulnerable to the people that we have let down. And so that's a part of leadership too. You know, we don't always have to make the right choices. Well, we should be, but when we don't, because we're human, we have a responsibility to live up and make it right. We also have a responsibility that if we don't always know all the answers, right, as leaders, people look to us, but we have to be ready to lean into building those leaders around us and allowing them to use their strengths and saying sometimes, I don't know. As a teacher, this happens often, where teachers in the classroom don't want to say when a student asks a question, I don't know the answer to your question, but to me, I don't ever understood that. We have a responsibility to be honest with one another. If I don't know the answer, I'm not going to try to, create some impromptu response just to confuse you so that I don't save face. No, I'm going to say to you, I'm so sorry, I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm going to find out for you, and I'm going to get back to you, and we're going to make sure that we both get ourselves educated on this particular topic, right? That, to me, what am I doing? I'm creating a relationship. I'm creating rapport. And as leaders, that's what we're always doing, trying to live up to be our best selves. So that's ethics. Like I said, another important chapter. I agree with some of my students who say this is probably the core of it, right? Is that if we are always trying to be good people, then we can be good leaders.